What is it about humans loving anthropomorphized mice in particular? The stranglehold that these critters have on human imagination is alive and strong in Danish studio Pine Creek Games' Winter Burrow. The gorgeous 2D storybook design reeled me in at first glance, and likewise, the contrast between the game's cozy and survival genres piqued my interest. But does this game offer substantive enough gameplay past its delightful animation? As a warning, this review contains some light spoilers. I intentionally and dutifully waited until the full version of the game was released, so all of my commentary here is on version 1.0.1 of the game. True to the allure of the game, I was immediately saturated in both gameplay and cutscenes comparable to some of humanity's most cherished 2D illustration. I saw likenesses of Over the Garden Wall, Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes, and Frog and Toad. Incidentally enough, the game's creators took inspiration from Over the Garden Wall, as well as Wind in the Willows and Mouse Guard. I've seen additional comparisons to Disney's depiction of Winnie the Pooh and The Secret of Nim. This gives the overall sense that the artists behind the game looked to some of the greats in the world of anthropomorphized animals while establishing the game's own art style and setting. The isometric display of the game was made rich by a cutaway home base, shadowy foreground layers for depth, and unquantifiable flora, fauna, and fungi that dot the wintry landscape. The menus, collectible items, and craftable furniture were all delightfully whimsical. On more than one occasion, I found myself comparing these smaller details to those of Neopets, which just fueled the nostalgia train even more. I had a lot of fun crafting new clothing items for my character just to see the different artistic looks. As much as I am a fan of 2D animation, it's not without its flaws, and this game definitely has some issues here. The physics of navigating this complex 2D environment, whether indoors or outdoors, proved to be kind of onerous. This led to my character getting stuck behind or on items with no recourse other than to hit the debugging function in the menu. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad this functionality exists, but it feels like the physics of this game could have been better ironed out before the full version of the game was released. To me, the get unstuck function seems like a potentially lazy fix to this problem. There were also moments where getting stuck were really discouraging and frustrating. I'll elaborate more on that later. Any good, cozy game has story to give it substance, and Winter Burrow is no exception. The cutscenes that set up the premise of the game are both heart-wrenching and laden with criticisms of post-industrial life. The deeply emotional theme continues as you meet more NPCs who help you on your way to become a better homesteading mouse while revealing their own shockingly dire circumstances. The winter world is no stranger to death, as these NPCs will show you. Similarly, the threat of starving, freezing, and even being eaten alive lurks in every inch of the map outside of your cozy winter burrow. The game does a good job of motivating you to leave the warm confines of the stump while ensuring that you never stray too far for fear of dangerous consequences. As you progress through the game, you will acquire more gear, tools, and craftable items to help you venture further and further. Because most of the game is focused on foraging and crafting, the dialogue between the protagonist and NPCs is relatively limited and feels very intentional. At no point in time did I feel like I was clicking past endless and pointless speech between characters. One flaw I did find here was in an early cutscene where the protagonist and an NPC are sipping on tea while backstory is being given. This is so specific and minor, yet I can't help but say it. There is way too much slurping in this scene, like way too much. And I say this as someone who isn't really bothered by eating sounds. Please, Pine Creek Games, in the next update, just reduce the slurping by like half. Additionally, I felt like the dialogue could have been better integrated into the gameplay, namely in helping the player figure out what to do next. Sometimes the game or an NPC would assign me a quest that was very straightforward, such as just crafting an axe. Other times an NPC would instruct me to find someone, with little to no guidance on where this third character was. In a game with no map and a sprawling 2D isometric layout that punishes you for spending too much time in the cold, this was unduly challenging. For a game that was supposed to be a relaxing take on the survival genre, it felt like anything but when it came to figuring out how to even begin what to do next. Flaws in dialogue aside, the overall story that Winter Burrow presents is as charming as it is emotionally charged. I interpreted the story as a subtle critique of the cozy genre, avoiding the genre's common pitfalls of mindless, low-effort gameplay and excessive romanticization of agrarian pre-industrial life. Again, death is a major theme of this game. That's not something you see a lot of in cozy gaming. The central story of Winter Burrow also offers a subtle indictment of the culture of isolation, interpersonal strife, and loneliness that has plagued humanity in the 21st century. Here, if you don't help your neighbors and they don't help you, you will all freeze and starve and maybe even get eaten by giant spiders. Cooperation, or compassion really, is the only way to survive. The actual premise of the game, learning how to survive in a hostile if beautiful landscape, was enjoyable enough. The beautiful design made collecting wood, berries, and other consumables a fun experience. The ecological differences between areas of the map offered both variety and challenge. Both quests and the puzzle-like nature of the landscape motivated scouring every last inch of the game. The progressively difficult, though never burdensome combat of the game fit the careful balance between cozy and survival. There was never an enemy you couldn't just run away from if you really didn't want to fight. There were certain aspects of the game that weren't well motivated though, and seemed to exist solely for the purpose of the player to perform for the sake of doing them. One example of this was food crafting. Unless an NPC requested a specific food item from me, I never felt the need to craft anything other than the two reliable items I discovered early on in the game. One could hypothetically get really into food crafting for the sake of better optimizing their time outside in the cold environment. The nature of the game meant I never went into it with a grind mindset though. An even more egregious example of seemingly pointless tasks was furniture crafting. Once I had a basic set of furniture crafted, I never really upgraded it because the game didn't assign any special functionality to most furniture. Slogging through spider-infested wood to collect birch to craft a useless table just felt like a chore. This brings me to one of two larger critiques I have of the game. The first is that this is an incredibly short game. I finished the whole thing in less than 10 hours of gameplay, and that was with me wandering around confused some of the time. Making things like furniture and food crafting more rewarding and purposeful would actually help to extend the gameplay. Even longer or just more quests from NPCs could have helped. Remember when I said I didn't pursue a more rigorous optimization of food crafting to be able to spend more time outside? Well, I'm glad I didn't, because if I had been more optimal there, it probably would have shortened the gameplay even more. I have a feeling that the devs behind this game intended the game to be a short and sweet visual experience that players return to every winter. Considering the inspiration from Over the Garden Wall, a show known for being serially watched by fans every fall, that wouldn't be surprising. The issue with that approach is that Winter Burrow costs $20 at full price. And I don't know that either the gameplay or the central story are so good that I'll be returning to it every winter. My other major critique relates to what I was saying earlier about trying to navigate the map and getting stuck. One big part of the game is figuring out what areas you can navigate to and what are essentially boundaries on the map. This is essential for finding certain NPCs, crafting recipes, and rare items. Because of the ease of getting stuck on terrain and objects, however, I was actually discouraged from poking around at the edges of the map for fear of getting physically stuck. Maybe getting stuck and having a hard time were intentional choices by the game devs, but as a player, if I can't tell between the intentional design of a game and the bugginess of a game, I'm not going to enjoy it as much. There's a difference between challenging and frustrating, and I worry that this game is a bit too much of the latter. So, is this game worth playing? In general, I would say this game's biggest strength is, of course, its visual appeal. There were various aspects of the game, namely in gameplay and technical bugs, that could be more robust so as to better support the visual appeal of the game. In that sense, I would say that Winter Burrow leans more into style over substance. However, I will say that, despite all my critiques, this game is still worth playing, with one major caveat. Do not buy it at full price if you can. I think the devs had a lot of really good ideas here, and it seems like they are willing to introduce more quality of life features, such as a map with updates. Even so, the short and good but not great central story do not justify the $20 cost. A final positive thing I will say about this game is that it is one of the best love letters to winter I have ever seen. In my opinion, winter is an underappreciated season, and Winter Burrow is a wonderful example of why I feel that way. Catch me on Twitch for live streams of Stardew Valley and other cozy games, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.